If you have questions about history and social studies, you've come to the right place. This is part 2 of our weekend Q&A, Ask Me Anything, where you can ask a historian, me, the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel, who now I've transformed myself into History Hefner with my usual smoking jacket on, anything you'd like to about history, social studies, and the like. And we've chosen as our background today Dante Alighieri, and of course one of the most famous poems of all time, the epic poem, the the Divine Comedy, which of course is best known for its part about hell, the Inferno, but it's actually a journey of Dante through hell, purgatory, and heaven. And it starts off, obviously, the Inferno is the most famous part of that. And although it is a fictional poem written by an Italian poet, it is a huge contribution to Italian literature from the 14th century. The reason I'm choosing it today is because it is a huge symbol of one of the most important literary pieces ever written in history, especially for the Renaissance, where vernacular language and speaking and writing in the language of the native people became particularly important. And what makes Dante's work particularly interesting is that this is a man writing in his own language at a time when Latin was the predominant language of Western Europe. Dante chose instead to speak in the to speak and write in the language of his native people, the Italians, and this put the Italian language on the map unlike anything else. This and the works of Petrarch are considered prime forerunners to the Renaissance and to people writing and wanting to read and access literature in their own language, a movement known as the vernacular, which became extremely popular during the Renaissance in England and Italy, France, and the rest of Europe. But hello and welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel, and to our Q&A Ask Me Anything, where you can ask me questions about Dante Alighieri and any other historical topics you would like to. And we do this every Friday and Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and for the next hour or so I will be answering all of your topics and questions regarding social studies and the like. But yes, thank you so much. Good to see you. We've got Solomon and Hars, my moderators, are here. Hello, Solomon. Hello, Hars. Solomon, enjoy your dance, and thank you. Got my haircut. Finally did my costume, finally got a long overdue haircut that was definitely very, very needed. And so yeah. Let me see. What is better, a president that wins a war or a president that avoids a war? A president that avoids a war might be better, but sometimes war is an inevitable part of life, as we know from basically all of human history, Steve. So, in my global history class, we are learning about the Industrial Revolution and facts I'll need to know. Any facts I'll need to know. Well, you can watch my video on the Industrial Revolution. I plan to do a full-length series on it. These are long-form videos. We do long-form videos every day here, Mondays and Fridays at 8 p.m. Eastern, and we also, of course, have our daily short videos that you can watch. But I have an entire video on the Industrial Revolution and the Industrial Revolution, and that talks about just a general overview of the Industrial Revolution. And for members only, I'm going to be doing a longer series of long-form videos discussing the different aspects of the Industrial Revolution. But what's important to note is that the Industrial Revolution, especially if you're just starting to learn about it, couldn't have possibly happened without the Green Revolution, the Agricultural Revolution, the introduction of crop rotations and new technologies that spurred on changes in agricultural development in Great Britain and other places that allowed for more crops to be produced, for better nutrition, for people to live longer, and for new technologies that would be important during the Industrial Revolution to be made that affected agriculture, such as the cotton gin and the mechanical reaper. Things like that. John Deere, Cyrus McCormick, of course, Eli Whitney. These necessity is the mother of invention, and the need for creating better crops and more access to food sources was huge in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. So the Industrial Revolution could not have started without an agricultural revolution the century prior, and necessity is the mother of all inventions. So the many inventions that obviously made the Industrial Revolution, steam, steel, the Bessemer press, things like that, were all made out of a necessity to continue changes in development in market economics and also in productivity, especially at first for the agricultural world, and then later for the burgeoning industrial world. So there's some stuff you might need to know about the Industrial Revolution. Who invented Christmas? Well, Christmas is a holiday that there are ancient paganic festivals, especially in Europe, much like with Halloween. And if you want to learn the whole history of Halloween, you can watch my video that I posted yesterday on it. But also, of course, join us for our live stream lecture tomorrow, where I'll be discussing the history and legacy of Halloween, one of the most famous holidays, one of the most popular holidays in the world. But basically, when you ask who invented Christmas, excuse me, I'm gonna fix something here. Christmas, obviously, and it was a Christian holiday that kind of took over a old winter celebration, a paganic celebration, in Western Europe, the Christian church kind of reappropriated these celebrations and refocused and oriented them on aspects of the Christian religion and theology. And of course, Christmas in its modern sense, with Santa Claus and many of these things, are reappropriations into a more consumerist, more secularized version of a religion. So you have a religious holiday taking paganic themes and turning them religious, and now you have a more secular culture taking religious themes and turning them more secular, such as with Santa Claus, who of course is based on a Christian saint who supposedly gave gifts and goodies to children and to the poor and things like that, St. Nicholas of Myra, and he's reimagined by Thomas Nast and eventually by the Coca-Cola Company as a fat man in a red suit handing out Christmas gifts based off of Father Christmas, Papa Noel, and all of these other figures from European history. So great to see you, Faraz. And the potato famine is indeed during the Industrial Revolution. The demand for potatoes by the British on the mainland of England starved many Irish people and forced many of them to leave, many of them went to the United States in the 1840s and 50s. So, yeah. Anyways, let me see here. Thank you for the compliment. Do you think we Persians can import our holiday Nowruz to the U.S. like the Irish brought Halloween? The Irish didn't necessarily bring Halloween, but celebrations. Halloween was a reinterpretation of ancient Druidic practices, which were obviously very popular in Ireland before Christianity kind of impressed itself upon that area. But let's see. What else? But yes, of course, any immigrant group in the United States has contributed greatly in bringing its customs and celebrations to the United States and making them more mainstream. The most recent example of this is a holiday that comes up tomorrow, which is Dia de los Muertos, which is a celebration in Latin cultures. Once again, another ancient paganic festival that was actually reinterpreted by the church to correspond with All Souls Day, which has become extremely popular thanks to Disney movies like Coco. So consumerism, mainstream culture is huge in the United States, and that's the reinterpretation of these holidays. And hopefully I'm coming in clear and you can hear me all right. And if there's any troubles, please let me know. But please like and subscribe. Thank you for joining us today. What is wrong, Jack? Why Russia is your favorite country? I think Russia's a mysterious country. I think there's a lot of mystery to be learned with Russia's history, with its culture, with its society. And so that's why I would say Russia is probably my favorite country. Let me see here. Please ask questions about history and social studies. This isn't a place to make political comments or to ask me about personal questions. If you want to learn about history and social studies, that's what I'm here to do, as we do this every Friday and Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern. We have our live stream lecture about the history of Halloween tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern. Check out my long-form videos that drop every Monday and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern. And of course, I have short videos dropping every day here at the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. And join me and Dante Alighieri as we go from the Inferno of our beginning of our live stream through the Purgatorio and eventually to Paradise of knowledge and illumination and understanding. So let me see here. Can we talk again about Woodrow Wilson? I don't really care, Hars. I don't want to talk about Woodrow Wilson constantly, but what are you going to say? What do you think about the Yugoslavia wars? Yugoslavia was held together by Tito's brilliance at being a political leader and keeping all of the different ethnic peoples who were usually disparate and at each other's throats united and keeping them together. Once that collapsed after Tito's death, the area was probably inevitably doomed to kind of fall back into ethnic bickerings, which the Austro-Hungarian Empire, for centuries, trying to get the different peoples, the Croats, the Slovenians, the Slavic peoples of that area to actually live together in some sort of harmony and on the same page was, quintessential to understanding that area. So the fact that Tito was actually able to achieve that was an incredible feat and keep those people united. The Austro-Hungarian Empire hadn't succeeded at that, and Tito seemingly had, and so after he died, a power vacuum and the breakdown of communism throughout the rest of Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union, all of this destabilized the entire Yugoslavian system. But Yugoslavia was basically just made after the end of the Great War in order to throw all of these peoples together and try to get them to live in peace and harmony, and it never ended up happening. So, do you agree with me that Woodrow Wilson lied about his stance of World War? No, I don't agree with you, and stop asking that. What Babylon Tower? No, that's not the Tower of Babylon, or Tower of Babel from the Bible. That is Dante Alighieri, the famous Italian poet who put the Italian language on the map, made a huge historical contribution by writing in the vernacular language rather than just Latin. He chose to write his epic poem, of a Divine Comedy, in Italian, and that is a vision of the 7 layers of hell, with people being tormented in different and punished for their sins in different ways. So, let me see. Why don't you agree with me on that? Because Wilson's efforts pre-1917 do not indicate someone who is going to take a country into war. That would be like saying that FDR was fully committed to getting the U.S. involved in a war, and I don't think that's true necessarily either. It starts in hell, but then you go through purgatorio, and then eventually you get to paradise. People only pay attention to the inferno because of all the torturings and the medieval art, much like this art, medieval and Renaissance art, which depicts the sufferings and the horrors of hell. Look at any painting by Hieronymus Bosch and the hell mouths he creates. They're quite awful. Let me see here. So. So let me see. Do you think historical actions should be judged by their intent or their outcomes? I think you should look at someone's intent, certainly, but outcomes obviously speak louder in many, many ways. And I think people should be judged by their context as much by their outcomes. Yeah. Narcissists are at the bottom? I believe so. If I like dictators, they aren't fake, they just do whatever they want. So, a benevolent dictator, Tito was more benevolent than the other dictators of the 20th century, actually turned out to be pretty successful because of that. Some dictators were better at finding the mean between the extremes, but they were still dictators. Well, you have to agree with me that Wilson ran on. He kept us out of war. He was helping the Entente tremendously and did the Pancho Villa expedition, and a year later got us into... Yes, I agree. I don't care, though. I don't think Wilson was trying to actively get the United States involved in the war. I don't think there's any evidence to suggest that. Do you think European pagan society was superior to Abrahamic rule? Well, when you mean Abrahamic rule, do you mean the rise of the Judeo-Christian ethic in the area? I think it was a different society. I think people have kind of idealized it in our post-Christian society, like much of the West has become. And obviously, a lot of people are curious about it. Did Evita and Perón make Argentina better or worse? I don't know. I would say worse. I think any dictatorship is bound to eventually have disastrous results and outcomes. Even a dictatorship like Stalin's that managed to make huge inroads in industrialization and transforming Russia from an agrarian to a modernized society obviously came with horrifying amounts of death and suffering, and no, that doesn't make up for it at all. What do you think about Pakistan? I think it's a fascinating country. I think it's the center of where Indian civilization really starts with the Indus River Valley people and so on. Why some people here are so obsessed with Wilson out of all people? Because people don't know when to quit. Is Trump the Antichrist? How would I know anything about that? I'm a historian. This is the History Channel. Ask questions about history, please. Well, when Wilson does all those things to make the military a lot more active and actively supporting the Allies, it's clear evidence he wants to. No. I think you're reading into his motives. I think he was worried about Pancho Villa's raids into the Southwest, which were continual. Obviously, that was a distressing thing. Even if there was no war going on in Europe, that would have been a distressing issue for him to deal with. And he had more sympathies towards the Allies, but he wasn't intending to get the U.S. involved in a war. Thank you, Serendipity. I really appreciate that. And remember to like and subscribe, like Emir is saying. It's great to see you, Emir. Emir has an emoji of Tsar Nicholas I of Russia because he is a member. So members get that. They also get early access and all of that. Any money you give through membership, through just watching the channel, through ad revenue, or through a super chat, we use to make this channel as good as we possibly can. What is your opinion about India and Pakistan standoff war hysteria? I'm getting tired of being asked about it. People ask me about it all the time. I don't know enough about it. Obviously, Kashmir, you had the first major or the first real war breakout this year between two actively nuclear powers in human history, which I think is kind of scary. By signing the federal act into law. Yeah, a lot of people hate Woodrow Wilson. I don't care. I'm not necessarily one of them. I'm not a huge fan of Woodrow Wilson, but I understand a lot of why he did what he did. So-called Native Americans are a mix of Asians in Europe that occurred. That's possibly true, Morgan. I would say the modernization of Russia by Stalin was his job, and he had obligation. We should not give him credit for something like that. No, he earned the title Man of Steel. It's not giving him credit. I'm saying he doesn't deserve credit because you look at the cost of human life and suffering. However, at the same time, the fact that the Soviet Union was so industrialized and economically and modernized was how they were able to beat the German war machine in the last World War, what I call World War III. Tanuki, good to see you. Long time no see. Because Wilson won re-election after 1916 and immediately a year later asked Congress to declare war, doesn't it seem like he... No, it doesn't. It doesn't, Hars. I'm sorry. It doesn't. I don't care. What do you think about the musical movie Evita with Madonna? I have not seen it. Call me 8. Well, Emir, I really appreciate that. 8, it's always great to have you here. And if there's anything you'd like me to touch on, I really appreciate it. The super chat really helps the channel. Anything that you give to this channel, we use to make this channel as good as possible. So thank you very much. But yeah, other questions, topics you guys would like me to cover, questions about history and social studies, all of that I'd be happy to deal with. Hopefully I'm not coming in fuzzy and you guys can hear me all right now. I think Stalin is like the Shah. Like, we don't give Ayatollah credit for giving people internet. Like, of course they'd have to do it. Yeah, I'm not giving Stalin credit. I am simply saying that the dictators achieve things. That doesn't make up for the fact that they are dictators. What do you know about aliens from outer space and historical records? Think of the Anunnaki. The ancient Assyrians had this idea that the gods had visited them. Watchers, Nephilim. These concepts are all over the ancient world. People believing that giants or spacemen, aliens, the gods from the stars had come and visited them. How do you conduct your research? I read into different sources. I try to access primary source documents. I look at the historiography, the arguments on different topics, and I also consult the recesses within my mind of all the knowledge that I've built up about this through the years. Great question, Noah. And I think this is the first time I've ever seen you, so welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. I think like you are disingenuously or disagreeing with clear evidence because you just don't want to be wrong. Not wrong. And it's not disingenuous. There's nothing disingenuous in what I am doing. Please provide an actual definition of disingenuous and then prove how I'm being disingenuous, because I'm not. I'm simply saying I don't think that your evidence, you're making an assumption about why Wilson did these things, and you're doing that in bad faith, which by definition is disingenuous. Are there any examples of successful nationalist countries in history without being racist? Nationalism and racism in the 20th century went hand in hand, although I would argue that Francisco Franco was not a racist necessarily. Not his country wasn't built on a nationalism that was overtly racist, and you can be nationalistic without being racist. Thank you, Salam. I really appreciate it to you, and best wishes to you and to the country of Pakistan. Why were Jews kicked out of so many countries? They were kicked out of countries because of the Arab-Israeli conflict, the 1948 war, the Palestinian problem, and of course also they were kicked out of countries because of their lack of assimilation in Christian Europe, for instance. I haven't read Sek-Iknon. What am I ignoring? Let me see. Give me a historical hot take about Russia. Russia is a European country. A lot of people don't want to admit it, but it is. It's just the most backwards of the European countries. How many languages were spoken on Earth, and is the number way different than dialects? Dialects are more common than languages, yes. Disingenuous is not acting genuinely with the truth or facts for any reason. I gave you facts which points towards an argument, and you refuse to acknowledge how it points to that argument. No, I disagree with the argument. It's disingenuous to assume that the facts lead to a conclusion that you have. That's called poisoning the well. I'm from the United States. I don't share more than that. What country was the most successful one so far, and do they still exist? If you look at the scope of empire, if you look at the scope of influence, control, and domination, the British would have to be the most successful. Usury was another reason that the Jews were targeted. In Europe, they couldn't charge. It was not common for Christians to be able to charge interest in banking, but Jewish bankers could charge interest, and so for that they were accused of being greedy. Yeah. So. Anyways, questions about history and social studies, I'll be happy to answer. We're about 1/3 of the way through our second live stream Q&A. We do these every Friday and Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then Sundays at 4 p.m. we do a live stream lecture, and tomorrow's will be about the history of Halloween. And this is History Hefner in my usual smoking jacket, which I usually try to wear during the live streams, but I haven't because it's been so dang hot. But it's nice and cool today, so I'm able to put it on and work with you guys on this one. So let me see here. Let me see. Hold on a second. Okay. Trying to get better lighting. Okay, that looks better to me. Okay, so anyways, where were we? What do you think about Justin Trudeau, the son of Fidel Castro? He's not the son of Fidel Castro. I want to change my accent. I like your accent. I love Americans, so can you help me out? What should I do? The best way to learn another language and to get used to a particular way of speaking that language, i.e. an accent, is to be around people who speak that language all the time. And I've been told I have a very European-sounding voice. How did Allied advancements in sonar and code breaking change German U-boat strategy after 1942? Not a huge expert in that necessarily, but basically the British were very good at, that's what the subject of the movie Imitation Game is about. The British were very good at code scrambling, and the Germans never were quite able to defeat them on that, never able to quite get there. I don't know Nader Shah. Did you know the word celery comes from the word salt? I've heard that before. What was John Henry Newman like, and why was he elevated doctor of a church? Wasn't he a Catholic, an Anglican who became a Catholic? He's a convert. How do you think the Africa may have turned out without the help of T.E. Lawrence helping to fight against the Ottoman Empire? Well, Lawrence was more. You might be asking about Arabia, Zempel, but basically, T.E. Lawrence was a British officer, writer, and explorer who was very interested in the Middle East and in helping the British Empire during the Great War, what I call World War II, what many of you will call World War I. And he ingratiated himself and became quite interested in Arabian culture and Arabian society, and was much more, and actually became quite a nationalist and quite a spokesperson and advocate for them during and after the war. The British had promised the Arabs their own independent state, at least in the Arabian Peninsula, if they would help overthrow the Ottomans, who had been lording over their authority for centuries. Of course, Arabs and Turks are not the same people, regardless of their Muslim affiliation. So the British actually used the Arab rebels during the Great War to help defeat the Ottoman Empire. The British then dissembled the Ottoman Empire with the help of the French after the war was over, and the Arabs did not get a full state. In fact, they got a British mandate where the British controlled the area until they believed it was necessary for these people, who they considered to be inferior as part of social Darwinism and paternalism, to be capable of actually ruling. And it turned out what made them capable of actually ruling was having enough money and a constant resource to be able to give the British Empire to make them more wealthy, and that turned out to be the oil of the Saudis. And this led to collaboration between British Petroleum and the British government, and the Saud family, and the Sauds rose to the top. And in 1932, the British mandate ended with them allowing the Arabians to become their own autonomous country under the leadership of the Saud family. That is why it's called Saudi Arabia. Lawrence was not alive by this point. I don't think he was. He had died in a motorcycle accident. But basically, he was incensed that the British Empire had double-crossed the Arabs, used them to defeat the Ottomans, then basically colonized them for a number of years. But he's a fascinating guy. It would have been quite interesting. I'm sure the British still would have succeeded, but Lawrence obviously made his stamp in bringing the Arabs against the Ottomans to help the British during the Great War. We should also mention that Jews were not allowed to do regular work, so they started giving critics. That's true, too. The last thing you said is not true. Jews were integrating, even becoming Christians, and they still wanted them, like Grandpa Spinoza. Some of them were, but a lot of those people, you're talking about Sephardic Jews in Spain, some of them were forced to become Christians. Some of them had been baptized as Christians and were considered to be Christians. But they grew up Jewish. So because they had been baptized by Christian midwives or Christian servants, they had grown up without knowing that they were Christian. And then when the baptismal records were unearthed, they were targeted by the Inquisition. This was quite common during the 15th and 16th centuries. It would be fun but there were plenty of Jews who became Christian or integrated into the culture. But the Jewish society in general is not one that it gathers many of the cultural, artistic, culinary, and other societal effects of a local area, but it retains its Jewishness in perpetuity, especially in a religious context, and that can rub empires that are very religiously motivated, such as the Christian and Muslim empires of the medieval, and modern world, can rub them the wrong way. It would be fun if we see each other in person and talked about history, and we could wear a suit and drink tea. I would love to do that for Oz anytime. Yeah, I'll come to Iran, the home of Persia, or you can come to the States. I'd be happy to meet you. Let me see. Well, you're Muffle. You're probably getting your comments deleted. That's why I can't see them. Pro, great to see you. Nadir Shah is the Napoleon of East. Oh yes, I've heard a little bit about this guy. So you are telling me Woodrow Wilson running a peace campaign right before an election and then switching up to the we need to make foreign democracies after the election isn't pointing to him lying? No. He had a vision, he had an ideal, and he developed this as the war went along. Remember, the United States was in the war for a year, and then it took another year for Versailles. So Wilson basically believed that democracy was the most successful political system in the world, and giving it to other peoples in Europe would be the most successful thing he could do. So it wasn't exporting democracy, but I think it was more it was an ideal that he had, a belief he had, but he was able to finally tailor it to a particular area. He wasn't plotting to do it just to unleash democracy in self-determination and Wilson's 14 points. There's no evidence of that necessarily. Christopher Columbus set out to find gold to find the building of a new temple in Israel. That's not fully true. I see Dante Alighieri in the background. I thought the Divine Comedy a myth. I just bought The Divine Comedy a month ago. Yes, I have a copy of it, and I'm using this background not because it's so historical. It's obviously a mythical story, an epic poem written by Dante, but because it's a huge historical breakthrough in the beginnings of the Renaissance, when the vernacular, the demand to speak and write in your native language, became more and more strong. And Dante, as an Italian, is a huge instrumental part of that. Remember, Italy wasn't a united country in the medieval and early modern Renaissance world. Italy was a series of different city-states and areas. Some like, for instance, Florence was its own, Venice was its own. Venice had a republic, actually, believe it or not. And so, but what was uniting to the Italian people was their language and their poetry. And men like Petrarch and Dante were huge in getting the Italian language onto the printed paper, or in this case, the written paper. It still wasn't a printing press. If someone supports peace before something that benefits them, and then supports war once they get their benefits, that points to the possibility they weren't as honest as they seemed. It's possible, but it's pointing to. You're not proving anything. You're just making allegations. Hello, Otter. Good to see you. I'm not saying Woodrow Wilson 100% was a liar. I'm just saying there's high amounts of evidence to suggest it's a possibility. Yes, and there's no evidence to say that it's a definitive one way or another, and it's much more likely that he wasn't, and really it was an opportunity that he didn't let go to waste. Did Europeans become Christian by force or choice? Mix of both. Mix of both. Have you ever studied how an albino developed? No. Nobody except the Spanish Inquisition. Exactly. Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition. What is the goal of Freemasonry? Control, power, secret societies are all into this. You already live in the States. Well, we'll have to link up some way. If you ever want to contact me and discuss something in more depth, give me suggestions, feedback, or have a longer conversation, you can always email me, friendlyneighborhoodhistory@gmail.com. And if Hars could put up the social media handles, you can follow us there. You can read my article writings on Substack. You can follow my Patreon to get access to my First Ladies series. You could also follow the Instagram for updates and early releases there. There was a time I wanted to live in the U.S. I'm pretty happy to live in Switzerland. Used to be Celtic, Christian, took over. Yeah, Switzerland's amazing. It's a beautiful country. I would love to live in Switzerland. What did the Romans ever do for us? Roads, law codes, basically created what would become Europe, so on and so forth. Aqueducts, running water, sanitation, bathing, some of the greatest writings in poetry. So, what structure do you... Octogrammer? I can't breathe because I've got question after question coming in and I'm trying to answer all of them. What structure do you find more impressive, Great Wall of China or the Pyramids of Giza? The Great Wall. The fact that there's been so many addendums to it through the years, as much as I love the Pyramid of Giza, and it's very mysterious in some ways how it actually got made, I think the Great Wall, even a more straightforward explanation, is more fascinating. And they created a desert and called it peace. True. Yeah. Fart in your hand and eat it like a sandwich. No. You first. What fruit is native to California, or is it all from elsewhere? I'm not sure. Do people still believe in Lost Cosmos? Does the self still have this kind of... some people do, but these people also believe Columbus probably thought the world was flat. Shuriken, great to see you. I did have a good Halloween. I hope you did too. You guys can check out my Halloween live stream Q&A special where I dressed up as Woodrow Wilson for my channel. So that's a Q&A from yesterday you guys can go and watch. And you guys can learn about Halloween through my video I posted on Friday, and also, of course, through my my live stream lecture tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern. We're bringing back honor dueling, fix our political problems. No, it would just lead to more dead people and more chaos. And can you imagine a world of social media and televisions and cameras looking at dead politicians all over? It would be it would probably cause a civil war. Let me see. Any other questions about history or social studies? And yes, we are quoting the Monty Python. It's absolutely hilarious. And please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Anything you can do to help the channel, we really, really appreciate. It's great to have you here. What is the key to surviving a siege? Not fighting the Ottomans. The Ottomans were really good at breaking sieges, but usually having enough resources to outlast any sort of starving out situation you might be in. Also hoping that you have reinforcements going. and being more than willing to destroy things in order to thwart the enemy's plans. The Russians did this with Napoleon when they burned their capital in order to humiliate him so he couldn't take their... It wasn't their capital at the time, but they didn't want Moscow to be taken by Napoleon because Moscow is the cultural capital of Russia, even if it wasn't... It is the capital now, but it wasn't the capital in 1815, 1812. Is Wild West a myth? There's a little bit of an exaggeration as to how wild the West actually was. There was a lot of settlement. There was a lot of discovery. But the idea of gunslingers and outlaws and cowboys is somewhat true, but it's not as rambunctious as Western movies and radio and television would have you think. Who invented the wheel and when? Most likely the Mesopotamians were the first ones to come up with the wheel. But once again, you have human civilizations and settlements developing around the same time, about 6,000 to 7,000 years ago BC. And you see that in Mesopotamia, you see that in India, you see that in China. They're all kind of coming together around the same time, and a lot of them are developing the wheel. When human beings stop being so itinerant, they start needing to carry goods around, and they need something to make it easier to move those goods and for their livestock to move their goods. And obviously that, like I was talking about with the Industrial Revolution, necessity is the mother of invention, and this leads to the creation of a wheel. And of course, the Native Americans didn't have a wheel, mainly because they were far more itinerant than other people. So, do you think the closing of asylums during the 60s in the USA has a link to today's mental health spike and lone killers? That could be a part of it, but there was a place where people were able to be kept. Now mental health is taken far more seriously, but it's also far more in someone's face in our modern society. Louis, good to see you. Do you think we're watching the end of the U.S. empire? The U.S. has had a hegemonic empire since at least the end of the last World War, World War III, what you might call World War II, and at least since, and perhaps as far back as the beginning of the 20th century, America has been extremely dominant in world affairs and able to get empires like France and Britain to do a lot of what it says. But the truth of the matter is empires last about 2 centuries or so. The United States may be at the beginning of its empirehood, or it might be slowly tumbling towards the collapse. Which was a greater threat to global capitalism, National Socialism or communism? The National Socialists of the Nazis were not capitalistic. They were more corporatist than anything else. But I think it was communism. It's the entire antithesis. Have you learned anything new and interesting about the history of tea lately? I haven't been able to brew tea. I've been so busy going through a lot of personal stuff, obviously busy with other stuff in my life. I haven't been as regular in my productions and my work for this channel. Trying to rectify that this weekend and get a lot out there, pumped out there for you. So please go and watch the videos we have here on the channel. But I do have a wonderful German samovar I got for my birthday, and I do love to brew tea. I've got a bunch of green tea left over that I need to brew soon. That's probably the healthiest tea there is for you. Yes, Judge Roy Bean. Good suggestion. Do you think America as the world leader did more damage to the world or more good? I think America on the net has done more good. I think America has gotten drunk off of their own successes and gotten cocky, and that's why you go from winning 2 world wars to embarrassing yourself in Iraq and Afghanistan. The Renaissance was the return of pagan values of artists to Europe as opposed to Christians shaming vanities. Not fully true. Could you paste a link to your Discord, anyone? I don't have a Discord. I do, but I haven't really activated it. I've been too busy to work on it. I hope you enjoyed the green tea, Eddie. You deserve it. Let me see. And ramen's always lovely. Hopefully it's not too hot where you are and you can enjoy that. And the tea will be hot too. But tea's very good for you, and I like brewing it from the leaves rather than from the tea bags. So, anyways, any other questions about history or social studies? We talk about tea a lot on the channel because we talk about everything on this channel, because all of these we talk about lots of different types of food and drink, because food and drink is obviously huge in human history. You don't have the Boston Tea Party without the British obsession with tea. You don't understand Chinese history without tea. Do you know about Rumi? A little bit, but not a huge amount. What do you think was the most valuable knowledge lost to in the fire of Alexandria? I don't know. It's been lost. We probably would have far more of a better understanding of how the ancients actually viewed the cosmological status of the world, perhaps astronomically, scientifically, and philosophically. If we had more access to those documents, we probably would have been able to find more information on maybe there are writings of philosophers, the Greek philosophers, that are lost to time, or some sort of a better religious understanding, a more comprehensive religious understanding of the Abrahamic religions. America hasn't had a good war since World War II, and they had a pretty bad record before that too. America's a toxic and negative force in the world, MIO. I understand why you think that, but you are incorrect. The United States won the Gulf War. It basically won the Korean War. The United States did poorly in Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan. That's definitely not up for debate. But if you look at the Cold War and America's exploits there, although obviously they did not always have good results, the United States did end up being on the successful side of the Cold War. Of course, that didn't lead to direct fighting, but the Soviet Union does not exist, and the United States came out of it even more powerful and more prosperous than they ever had been before. And before that, the United States had destroyed the Spanish Empire, defeated the Mexicans, defeated the British, and also, of course, defeated the South. I consider the Civil War to be a war against where the United States won that conflict. I understand why a lot of people think that the United States has done more harm than good. But I think when you look at not only its successes on the battlefield, but also its successes in international charity and human rights and things like that, the United States has made plenty of errors, but also has made plenty of triumphs. Was Rome better with Caesars or Senate Republic? A good question there. I think Rome was far more successful and far more impressive under the emperors. Is it true to? But the system of the republic that the Romans created was so well balanced and so thoughtful that and so cohesive that it has inspired us politically for generations. The Romans make their famous law codes. The Romans make their aqueducts. The Romans make their roads. The Romans make their legions under the direction of a republican government. So all the framework for what made Rome so impressive as a society, for the Caesars to basically use these tools and continue to spread the Roman glory until about the beginning of the 3rd century, is because of the Pax Romana. It is because of the Roman Republic that set it all up. Is it true to absorb vitamin D from the sun is best in the morning? I don't know. Might be. Here's a question. The famous picture of Jesus is not accurate. Where did it come from? And is it racist to paint him white while he wasn't? It's not racist at all, no more so than it is for Africans to reimagine Jesus as being black. Jesus is clearly not a white man. He was Middle Eastern. He was Jewish. But Cesar Borgia was a patron of the arts in the Renaissance, and one of the painters, I think it was Dürer, painted Jesus looking like Cesar Borgia, and this, of course, became the inspiration for paintings of Jesus with the blonde hair, the curls, the beard, all of that. Although paintings and depictions and mosaics and other things before that had Christ depicted as a man with a beard, so it's not a huge stretch to say that the paintings of the Renaissance are not completely inaccurate representations of Jesus of Nazareth. But, if you think of a painting of Jesus, that painting is not directly based on Cesar Borgia. That's based partially on Borgia, but also on others. And Borgia was, so the way the Renaissance works, and this ties into Dante and all of this, you had an artist, and the artist worked for a patron. A patron was usually a very wealthy client. The Borgias were one of the most powerful families in Italy, and they paid a painter, I forget the name, I think it was Dürer, Albrecht Dürer, at the beginning of the 16th century, to paint Jesus, and basically painted Jesus looking like Cesare Borgia. So you painted these important figures in history, mythology, or religion to look like the family member of your patron, to pay homage to them, to show them respect, and so that they could show it, and they would keep the painting. They would pay you for your services and your artistic education. They would take the painting as a trophy, basically. Let me see here. They won the Cold War. Great news. I'll tell the Vietnamese kids with Agent Orange birth defects. I'm sure they'll be thrilled to hear that. Well, Metia, I didn't say that the United States won every war it fought. I mentioned Vietnam as a war the United States did not win. What I am saying is the Cold War, and you consider what the conflict was, by definition, the United States won that. What do you say about the Trump politics? I don't want to talk about politics on the channel. If you want me to go into political analysis, give a super chat. Agriculture and civilization degrades the quality of human race and planet Earth over time. We need a way to stimulate hardship of nature and industrial scale permaculture. No, we don't. That's the Green Revolution in the Neolithic Age was a mistake. It wasn't. It's a natural progression for humans to stop moving around and be able to settle and develop what we call civilized society. I'm talking about being a force for good. You said the United States hasn't had a good war, so you were wrong about that. So you're being disingenuous. But being a force for good, I think winning a war, I think freeing Eastern Europe from communism was a force for good if we're talking about the Cold War. Tea originated in China and then spread to Asia, then to Europe in short, basically, but became highly addictive to the British in the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. Why is Picasso's painting so significant? And are they still around? Some of them are, of course. What made Picasso so significant was A, how prolific he was, but how he took modern art and then went another step up, basically creating the genre of Cubism. Well, maybe it's just me, but U.S. in the Middle East has had more negative effect. That's true. I feel the UK may did a little positive, but I can't think much positive effect. Well, the British started the process of negative interactions in the Middle East. Look at what happened to Mohammed Mossadegh in Iran. The British kind of started that out with the mandate system, and the Americans kind of followed suit. And it was all about stopping communism, no matter the cost. What about Black playing Judas in the movie Jesus Christ Superstar? Don't care. My favorite art style is Cubism. What is yours? Impressionism and post-impressionism. Uday was very nice to his people. Okay. But let's see. Yeah. Who is Uday Hussein? I don't know who Uday Hussein is. So, anyways. The Catholic Church still set everyone back 700 to 800 years. Period. I can understand why a lot of people think that due to the issues of Galileo, the Spanish Inquisition, and Copernicus. But the truth of the matter is, many of the greatest scientists, fields of study, universities, and ancient learnings that were necessary for the development of the Renaissance were preserved and then promulgated with the Catholic Church in mind. The Catholic Church invented universities, they invented high schools, they invented a bunch of different things that were extremely important to education. Oh, that's right, that was one of his sons. The creepiest thing about militaries is that they experiment on their own soldiers, like nuclear veterans. Yes, the Tuskegee experiment. The United States, look, I'm talking good stuff about the United States, but the United States has done a lot of horrible things, and I want that to be on the record. The United States has been off in many places, and the Tuskegee experiment's a great example of this. Your favorite music period or genre? I love classical music, but I love almost every genre. He was so evil, Saddam said he wouldn't end power after him. Thank you for sharing that. I agree with Persian constitutional revolution, which was positive, was inspired by the UK, even if the UK opposed it. And 1941 invasion of Iran did cause much political freedom in Iran, even if not intended. Well, that's when they put Mohammed Pahlavi in power. If the United States had allowed him to stay, perhaps things in Persia would be better today. Do you remember kids getting smelling salts during sports, and is that now outlawed? It might be, I don't know. But smelling salts was used in the 19th century to wake up someone who had fainted or passed out. It was supposed to have, it was a concoction that would supposedly have the things that needed to be smelled in order for somebody to wake up. So, anyways, we go into marriages and shoot the husband, kidnap the wife. Oh, he was kind of doing his prima nocta thing. That's awful. Anyways, other questions about history or social studies? Let's see. Anything else about history or social studies? Was Vlad Tepes a hero of Europe? I mean, he did what he could to fight off. To the Romanians, he might be. He did what he could to fight off the influence of the Hungarians, but also the Ottoman Turks. He's seen as one of these figures during this very dark period where the Ottomans were extremely successful and were making inroads into Eastern and Central Europe, where they dominated the Balkans and did everything in his power to resist their encroaching power and authority. So, yeah, Vlad Tepes is, of course, we know him because of the stakes. We know him because of Count Dracula and his bloodthirstiness. But for a lot of people in that area and in that time period, he was seen as a hero fighting for his people. What is your favorite historical city? Oh, probably Paris. What was the word that you just used? I don't know. What word? Oh, prima nocta. Oh, that was the process in medieval Europe. It means first night in Italian or Latin. It basically is the idea that nobles would have rights to the wives of their peasants, of their citizens, of their denizens' wives. The first night of their marriage, they would have rights to them physically. It's a horrid practice. It's highly exaggerated. Look at the movie Braveheart. It happened from time to time. It's kind of overblown, though. Do you think in the future, when our news, our history, what are the most historical turning point that we live through? 9/11, the election of Donald Trump, the election of Barack Obama, Brexit, the reshambling of the Middle East, the end of Saddam Hussein, the fall of Assad, October 7th. Those are some of the ones that will live on. Putin's invasion of Crimea in 2014. How much of an impact did coffee have on works and coffee breaks? Coffee was huge because you now had, and is coffee, again, culinary food and drink is so huge for society. Coffee is handled and consumed differently in different parts of the world. In Europe and in Asia, it's consumed very sweetly with a lot of spices and sugars available. In the United States, black coffee has become very powerful. Some of the strongest coffee is very big. The Middle Eastern coffees are some of the most famous and well refined. And of course, coffee in Turkey will stick to your teeth. It's so strong. Africans make very strong coffee. In the United States, coffee breaks finding times to have breaks for coffee was huge because coffee was considered extremely good at getting people to work and get things done. So as you see the development of a corporate world in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, and as that leads to things like work breaks in the weekend, collective bargaining allows that to happen. Workers on their breaks have coffee in order to get their work done as soon as they can. So yeah, there you go. Which part of Russian history you like the most? I like the 19th, 20th century, the fall of the empire, and the rise of the Communist Party. I find it just fascinating, that liminal period. I think Russia peaks when they defeat Napoleon, then the imperial system spends a century in decline, and then the Russian Empire collapses. It's always a fascinating thing to look at the contingencies of what could have been done to keep Russia from becoming a communist dictatorship in the 1920s. Probably, and many people think it's inevitable. History is not inevitable, but still people believe this because they don't know about history. Was the golden age of piracy a revolution or just a free-for-all? More of a free-for-all. Pirates would often fight against each other, and it just so happened that in the late 17th and early 18th centuries, along the coast in the Caribbean, along the coast of the eastern Atlantic seaboard, you had a lot of privateers running ramshot, doing their own thing, and of course that's where you get guys like Blackbeard and Redbeard. But yeah. Anyways, please like and subscribe if you're enjoying the history that I'm talking about. Check out all of our long-form content that drops every Monday and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern, and all of our short videos that we drop every day. What about 10/7? I think it's very significant. I think that it changes probably the way the world looks at Israel. Most of the argument about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, especially in the West, has been pro-Israeli. I think the rhetoric has to shift because of Israel's overreaction and how they handled that war. It also probably shifts the conversation into the immediacy for a two-state solution and a revamping and re-understanding of the Levant. So I think it's absolutely huge. I think it's shaping a generation of young leftists, and is testing the limits of the political influence of Israel on places like the United States and Great Britain. I think the decision of Putin to invade the Ukraine was taken. Yep. Jeez, I think that's kind of an exaggeration, but yeah, a history pirate show would be cool. Yeah, I should probably do a video on the golden age of piracy. I think if Tsar would have actually made Russia constitutional monarchy, revolution would be less likely to happen. They did, and Nicholas just wasn't okay with the Duma. He wasn't okay with the October Manifesto. He just chafed under this being forced to end the Russian Revolution with political concessions in 1905, and so that revolution never went the way it should have gone. Alexander II, his grandfather, was far more open to this, but he was killed before he could do it, which just goes to prove, once again, if you look at revolutionary history and the development of radical ideologies in the 19th century, you see that anarchists, socialists, communists, all of these different peoples, fascists, will thwart regular democratic political debate between the right and the left, and they typically tend to be almost the same in the most extremes. I believe that historically speaking, politics is a horseshoe. If communism took the world over, would it end up eating itself from the inside out? Probably. I don't know if single nation communism cannot survive. I don't think global communism, which would lead to Trotsky's version of global communism, would have killed tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people. It would have been far more. Just imagine the Russian Revolution on fire in countries all over the place. The idea that this would just spontaneously happen all over at once wasn't even something that Marx thought was possible. So yeah, yes, I know if Duma stayed, communists would never take power. You look at Stolypin, you look at Kerensky, you look at some of these political figures in Russia in the first couple of decades of the 20th century. If Stolypin had not been killed, perhaps you avoid joining the war. Nicholas doesn't become the commander of the forces. I mean, just there were so many things that could have happened. Kerensky getting rid of Kornilov, when Kornilov was his only support to keep away the Bolsheviks. Would have allowed a leftist society to emerge in Russia that would have been a little more gradually Marxian, but you probably would have had continual elections and could have made reforms there. So yeah. Why Russia historically was so much more backward compared to the rest of Europe. The Mongol invasion set Russia back, and by the time they got out of that, Europe was already in the midst of the Renaissance. Is it true that brothels during the Civil War, the ladies would use a candle for the timer? Yes, I've heard that rumor too, and they also had very rudimentary forms of birth control, including diaphragms. How would history have changed if Sir Oswald Mosley was elected Prime Minister? Don't know enough to say that. Yes. Thank you, AZ. Thank you for sharing your opinion. I believe constitutional monarchies are were more immune towards revolution. Well, yeah, you get people to get their rights, but you also, so constitutional monarchies, and this is what makes Great Britain so fascinating, politically speaking. Revolutions are less likely for two, not just because of the constitutional part, because of the monarchy part. You have this figure that is the symbol of a country that inspires patriotism and nationalism, and communism does not like these things. Communism does not do well with nationalism. Communism is supposed to be supranational. It's supposed to be a global phenomenon, and so communism has been antithetical to nationalism ever since its advent. So communism doesn't thrive when you're arguing for the workers' revolution, yet people are more interested in their national identity. One reason the communist revolution of the Bolsheviks doesn't spread into Europe as successfully as it should, shout out to the Spartacists in Germany, is because nationalist impulses by the Polish allow Field Marshal Józef Piłsudski, who has the greatest mustache in human history, to thwart and defeat a much larger Russian force that is trying to basically overthrow him and force a communist government into Poland in 1919. It's actually one of the most fascinating after-war, or 1920, it's one of the most fascinating after-war events that nobody talks about, how the Polish actually are probably responsible for keeping communism from creating an Iron Curtain in the 1920s rather than the 1940s after the last World War. But you've got a monarch, you've got a national symbol, you've got a national icon, and that inspires patriotism, and people will love their country more than they will love a violent revolution. Go figure. But you also have the constitutional part that allows people to vote for their laws or vote for their people who will make their laws, and these people will do what they can to supposedly help the people. And so you have representative government. You didn't have that in Russia. And when you suppress reasonable political moderation, you eventually end up with radical forms of beliefs. The more the Russian autocrats suppressed the views of the people, the more radical those people became. So you could have basically rank communism and anarchism being the mainstay of the political left in Russia at the turn of the century. Sovereignty will always be better than slow fighting in democracy. Well, I'm saying that I'm calling for a marriage of both. The Great Mustache. Name again. Joseph. It's Joseph, but with an F at the end. But it's Joseph Pilsudski. 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 I love that name. What do you think of the idea that the U.S. adopt a system like UK? Maybe a Native American with the title Grand Chief who does this. Well, the American executive has far more power than the British king. So in a way, the Americans kind of have morphed into that, especially with the imperial presidency developing in the 20th century, where the U.S. president does act, especially in times of war, like a dictator would, but a benevolent one, hopefully. So the United States is kind of already there in many ways for us. Anyways, so we're thinning out a little bit. We're near the 52-minute mark. I'm going to call it there. Oh, how tall was Abraham Lincoln? 6'4", without his height. And George Washington, I think, was 6'2". Two tallest presidents, two best presidents. Go figure. Tall people are good. I should know. I'm tall. Somebody write that name, please. Okay, somebody put it in the chat. Joseph, same spelling as Joseph, Pilsudski, P-I-L, S-U-D-S-K-I, Pilsudski, Field Marshal Józef Pilsudski, who eventually became the dictator of Poland for a short time. I think the Nazis defeated him. I think he was there or he died right before the Nazis show up in 1939. And that's the beginning of World War III, or what you call World War II. Anyways, I'm going to wrap it up there. We're just under 50. We're just almost at an hour. We usually go, thank you, Józef Pilsudski. Thank you for that spelling. We went 70 minutes yesterday, so we're going 10 minutes less, and we're averaging out to about an hour. Usually we go over all the time because you guys have such great questions, but I appreciate everything you guys do and all of your great contributions. And do a video on Tacitus, that'd be a good one. What came first, the chicken or the egg? How is it explained? If a chicken comes from an egg, but there needs to be a chicken for an egg to be produced, so did the chicken come from something else? I don't know. I think scientists are kind of settling on that the chicken evolved and then the eggs was just part of the evolutionary process. Lincoln was 56. Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. I really appreciate seeing you all. Scarface, Fidel, Morgan, Henry, good to see you. Salam. Thank you for subscribing, Morgan. We're glad to have you joining all on board. Everyone who hasn't liked, please like on your way up. But we got Bell, we got Fidel, we got Faraz, some of the longtime friendly neighborhood historians, and you can be one too just by subscribing. And thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate that. And yeah, it's an amazing mustache. I love it. And my mustache, I think, has become quite nice, but his is pretty impressive. So please join us tomorrow for my live stream lecture on Samhain, and there might be time for Q&A at the end. Samhain, by the way, is the old pagan word for what became known as Halloween. But yes, I hope you guys come first tomorrow, just like the chicken and not the egg, to join us at 4 p.m. Eastern for my live stream lecture on the history of Halloween. And yeah, take care. Enjoy your Saturday. Use the knowledge here to impress somebody at a bar and get a free drink. Thanks. All compliments of History Hefner and the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. We'll see you again very soon. Check out our long form videos and our short form content. And as always, take care. And remember, love history. Bye bye now.